and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And lots of news this week. Illinois has become the 15th state to open marriage to same-sex couples, and Hawaii is on the brink.
They may even beat Illinois to the altar because it may be implemented there earlier. And the Federal Employment Non-Discrimination Act seems to be headed for passage in the U.S. Senate as we tape. It may actually have passed by the time you see this. But it also looks like it may be blocked in the House. They're working on devices to get around that.
And the religious exemption in the Employment Non-Discrimination Act remains quite controversial.
Yeah, do we even want this thing? Another member of the U.S. House of Representatives has come out in the middle of his run to become governor of Maine.
We're going to review all the election results of note, particularly where LGBT issues and candidates were on the line.
In international news, a Russian gay social center was invaded by thugs who seriously injured some of the activists there.
Ireland will vote on same-sex marriage in 2015.
The whole country, as opposed to here. We'll give you takes and reviews on the movies Kill Your Darlings, The Dallas Buyers Club, and Ender's Game.
And our guest, who we are turning to now, is Dwayne Brown, a gay activist from Jamaica who fled his country to avoid anti-gay violence. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And before we get to talking to you, we want to sort of set the scene here and show people what's going on in Jamaica. We have a little clip from the BBC of an interview with your former Prime Minister, Bruce Golding, when he was confronted about the homophobia in Jamaica. So let's run that.
I suppose there's this intangible question of image. And Jamaica's image, arguably, right now, is not altogether positive. And one other aspect of that I'll put to you.
We have one major problem. One major problem so far as that image is concerned, our crime rate. We have to bring that down.
Let me put another to you. We've talked extensively about that. Let me put another to you, and that is Jamaica's attitude to homosexuality.
Yeah.
That is a problem. If you listen to Human Rights Watch's Rebecca Schleifer, she says homophobia in Jamaica is the worst she has ever seen. The New York Times just ran a big story. Just a couple of months ago, there was a case in Mandeville, a crowd storming a house. 4 men having dinner were attacked and brutally assaulted because they were believed to be gay. And that was not unusual.
Yes.
What are you doing about it?
Well, we have given instructions that crimes against persons because of their sexual orientation must be pursued with the same vigor that any other crime.
But they're not, are they?
Generally speaking, they are. They are now. We do have a long-standing culture that is very opposed to homosexuality. I believe that that is changing. I believe that there's greater acceptance now, that people have different lifestyles, that they must be, their privacy must be expected.
Dwayne, what do you think when you see him say that?
Wow, I was a little bit perturbed. That was in 2008 when he made that statement, and as the commentator said, there was an incident that was in Mandeville where a group of homosexuals in their home were chopped to death. And one of those persons, I know them because he was the one who tried to escape the mob and actually fell in a sinkhole where, although they couldn't find his body. But when it comes to Bruce Golding, I mean, he shared the sentiment of the majority of people in Jamaica. And when it comes to tolerance, that is non-existent. With current situation, we have people who are being continually being beaten. We have activists who try to get gay-friendly tolerance message out there in the media, and they have been rebuffed by them.
Now, you weren't particularly an activist in 2011. You had written some things defending gay rights.
Yes.
So a little bit of an activist. But then what happened to you in 2011, and why are you here in the United States?
Well, it's really a long story, but the short version of it is that in 2011, I started to get really more familiar with human rights issues. I've been around dealing with people who are victimized and abused because I was a volunteer at JFLAG when from 2011.
And JFLAG
is Jamaica Forum for Lesbians, All Sexuals and Gays. And during that, my tenure at that organization and working with other activists, I pounced upon a mob while I was helping some activists from Sweden. They were doing a documentary on human rights issues. And we went to a community to interview two guys, and while exiting the community, I was a driver, there was a mob who surrounded the car with machetes and stones and shouting that we should come out. I think the only reason why we were alive was that they were white and there were females in the car. And there was another incident in 2011, that was in May, and there was another incident which really changed everything, and I tell myself I can't be here anymore. That was outside of my community. Now it was more immediate and more closer to home, where I was on my way home from university. I was pursuing my postgraduate in teaching, and on my way home there were 3 persons who I know. Actually, one of them I know very well. And while coming home, they chased me, and I escaped. And that was it. And I decided to leave. Luckily, I had a U.S. visa in which I had an option to leave the country. So that really was a point that really forced me to leave.
And you've come here, and now you're working with a new group.
Yes.
Called Jamaica Anti-Homophobia Stand to try to do what?
To try to accentuate the issues that LGBT Jamaicans are facing in Jamaica. The group was founded in 2012, last year, out of the need for Jamaicans within the diaspora to be more visibility. We believe that the more visible you are, liberty and rights will be given onto you. So there was a bit silence in the community as it relates to issues that are going on in Jamaica, and there is not much light. A lot of people are not really aware of the atrocities and the human rights abuse that are taking place there. So I sat down with my other colleague, who was Maurice Tomlinson. He's one of the really well-recognized.
We've talked about him on this show and shown some of the videos he's made to try to air them and promote tolerance in Jamaica. He's had some trouble getting them on the air there.
Yes, and that is still in court. That's how deep the spread of homophobia and intolerance is, even through the media. I think the reason why they claim that the ads were promoting an illegal lifestyle and an abominable act.
We run into things like that around the world, and we do hear these stories out of Jamaica, and we hear about attacks not just by mobs, but by authorities, by police who attack groups of homeless youth or other people who are gay, shoot them, beat them up, burn the clothes of the youth. Can you give us some sense of what life is like on a daily basis? Are these isolated incidents? Is there a general climate of fear? Can people be out in Jamaica?
I must say, and we really agree, that the climate there is so hostile that one cannot be really out in Jamaica. There's like people who live in the upper class in the society, which is a really minority, who are among their peers, who can be comfortable to say, I am gay, but not openly say I am gay. As it relates to the incidents that are facing homeless youths in Jamaica, there's like a vast, there's a disparity where a lot of homeless youths are pushed out of their home by their community and their parents. Now they're living on the streets. The sewage plants, or the sewers, actually, in Kingston is where they live. And just the other day, probably about 2 weeks ago, the police went there to raided the area where they were living. Some were beaten, some were pepper sprayed, and things like that we don't hear unless the media in Jamaica really hear it, or people like myself who has a blog called Minority Insight who report these incidents and highlight them so that we know what's going on there.
So should people vacation in Jamaica, or should they be boycotting Jamaica? And what should people here or around the world be doing to try to help LGBT people in Jamaica?
I believe that until Jamaica is held accountable for the human rights abuses that are meted against persons who are LGBT, it will continue, right? So what we need the world to know is that gays and Jamaicans are human beings, and we need equal rights and protection. We need to be enfranchised with the basic human rights that everybody else, or whom are heterosexual families and partners, to know that we are equal and we want those rights. So we want the world to know and to help us to highlight those issues, so that to put pressure on the government, so that they enable to push them to offered equal rights and respect to persons who are LGBT. Even just the other day, Councilmember Daniel Jump for the New York City Council and other members of the council wrote a letter to our Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller, urging her to protect the rights of gays.
She promised to at one point, and she hasn't fulfilled her promises, and you, in fact, demonstrated against her when she was here recently for a UN meeting.
There's the tape there. Yeah. She was over at the Ford Foundation for a UN meeting.
That's her in the pink.
And you were there. You led this demonstration, yes?
Yes.
And did you get a chance to talk to her?
No, we didn't get a chance to talk
Well, what's
to
your
her.
message for her?
We want Portia to end the discrimination against LGBT in Jamaica and to offer equal rights to LGBT in Jamaica, which to be enshrined in our Constitution, and to end discrimination. The Buggery Law, which is on our books for over 150 years, criminalized same-sex, actually consensual sex between same-sex couples.
Brought in by the British?
By the British themselves, or famous
Yes.
queen.
Yeah.
And so we want them to amend the law to exclude persons who are LGBT or consensual sex between adults.
Well, we only got rid of our own laws like that 10 years ago in this country, believe it or not.
It was down to 13 states, but we only got rid of it in New York in 1980.
And there are some places that are still trying to prosecute people, but so we understand the difficulty of this. Does it take pressure from around the world? Do other world leaders have to put pressure on Jamaica to change its ways? The UN?
The Commonwealth?
I believe everything is correct. Jamaica is signatory to the Human Rights Declaration. And
Aren't they all?
Yes, they are. Which is not really binding, but nonetheless, it's signatory. It's symbolic that you should protect the rights of all human beings, including LGBT. And we would like the Inter-American Commission to really stand up, and because all of this is documented, right? All of this is documented. Last year there were 8 gay men who was reportedly murdered. There were 53 incidents where lesbians and LGBT the situation with lesbians in Jamaica is underreported. They are raped, which is corrective raping, trying to change them, change them. And a lot of these abuses go unreported and unrecalled. So.
Well, Dwayne, we're finishing off, so I'd like you to, I mean, I know you've had to leave Jamaica. What's the biggest sign of hope that you see?
Well, the biggest sign of hope I see, and actually I see so far, is that the Justice Minister came out and he said that, acknowledge that there should be change, right? So I hope the attitude and the churches in Jamaica, which pushes this hate toward and intolerance towards Jamaica, will actually embrace people who are different and respect them. We don't really need them to accept us, just to respect us in a way that we are humans and we
Right.
deserve equal rights and protection.
First step.
Well, you're doing very brave and terrific work, and we thank you. How can people get in touch with you? You're on Facebook with,
Yes.
people just can Google, I guess, Jamaica Anti-Homophobia Stand, and
Yes.
it'll come up, and you have a Facebook page.
Yes, which is Jamaica Anti-Homophobia Stand on Facebook. You can also get information on a minorityinsight.org, which is a blog about Jamaican issues that the LGBT faces.
I'll make a note of that, and I'll put it in our email and let people know about it.
And in the spirit of all of us working together and everything, it's a pleasure to be working with you in Queer Nation on the Russia stuff, too.
Yes. We have to, I want to thank my partners and my allies who are really supporting us so far, especially Council Member Daniel Jum and the New York City Council, Queer Nation, Queens Democratic Club, Lesbian and Gay Democratic Club. We really have to thank them for their support.
And again, your
Okay.
blog is Minority Insight?
Minority-insight.org.
-insight.org. All right.
Okay.
Thank you for being with us, and we'll be following your
Thanks,
story. Keep
Dwayne.
us posted.
for
Come
having me.
back.
Bye-bye.
Good luck.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Okay. Now we will get on to the rest of the news. All right. Well, we should start, I guess, with the marriage news because that's the big headline this week.
Illinois has been heard from. We didn't,
Land of Lincoln.
I have to confess,
Yes.
I didn't think this was going to happen. I thought that the legislators were going to just wait for the courts to do something.
Well, we've been hearing such mixed signals from there for months.
But they
and it passed the Senate on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, they voted in the House there 61 to 54 to pass this. So by one vote, basically. President Obama is celebrating and tweeting about it, and it does.
Overjoyed. He and Michelle are overjoyed.
It exempts private clubs, like from having to do weddings and things, but that's apparently an existing exemption. By the way, the name of this act is the Religious Freedom and Marriage Fairness Act.
Oh,
Boy,
please.
can we name them. Speaker.
Well, we learned that from the right wing.
The
finally.
Speaker of the Illinois House, Madigan, who had
Yes.
stayed on the sidelines on this, got involved making calls on it. It doesn't go into effect because they passed it in this, what they call their veto session. It doesn't go into effect until June 1st after the governor signs it.
They changed the implementation date so that they needed fewer votes
Yes.
in this session to do it, which turned out to be a good thing. So June 1st, 2014. They also say that the March on Springfield last month actually did create some movement on
Good.
this and broke some of the logjam. And with its legalization in Illinois, we'll see what happens when we get to Hawaii, we now have 37% of the U.S. population living in jurisdictions that do have legal same-sex marriage.
And Hawaii is on the brink. It's been moving through the House there.
Slowly.
Well, because anybody who shows up to testify there can testify several times, apparently, under different names. They had 5,184 testifiers. I used the word nuts about that, but that's their procedure.
Well, it was a deliberate stalling technique by the right-wing evangelicals. When they saw that there was open enrollment for testifying, they sent in these waves of people, and if someone couldn't show up, they found someone else to go and use their identity to testify so that they could prolong this process as long as possible. It was a very deliberate campaigin on their part.
And they complain about us.
Exactly. But the most depressing moment of that was when, let me see if I have his name. No, but the a policeman from Oahu, who is the union chief, got up to testify against this law and said, "You will have to kill me to make me enforce this." Kill me! Ay, ay, ay. This is
Well, you're
a
lucky
police union chief.
You're lucky we don't believe in the death penalty.
Oh my God. But we do believe in firing people who are members of the police force and refuse to enforce the law.
Terrible.
So this, if it goes through as expected over the next few days, would go into effect on December 2nd, which is why I say they're going to beat Illinois to the altar by about 6 months. So
Okay.
that's where we stand
Now,
on that.
the Battle of the National Guard is heating up. We told you that several states have been resisting registering, giving IDs to same-sex married couples in the National Guard if they have a same-sex partner. So Chuck Hagel got involved with this and said—
Defense Secretary, you remember him.
Yes. He says, look, this creates hardship and inequality for service members, and they could do a lot of things to stop them, like making everybody get their ID cards from a federal facility as opposed to a state National Guard facility.
Well, he got up at an Anti-Defamation League dinner, I think, and made this big speech all about this and said he was not going to stand for this, that the National Guards, even if they had some state control, had practically complete federal funding. They were subject to the Department of Defense orders, and he was not going to sit still for this.
So he told the head of the National Guard to meet with the adjutants general in the states and tell them what was expected of them. But Florida, by the way, is already sending all couples to federal facilities to get their ID cards, not in state buildings. Indiana is reversed their opposition.
There are 5 states that are holding firm in opposition to this: Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia, Mississippi, and West Virginia.
And the Oklahoma governor, Mary Fallin, a Republican, told Obama and Hagel to, quote, stop using the National Guard as a pawn in a larger social agenda. And of course, Rick Perry.
Equality.
Rick Perry is resisting down there in Texas. What would we do without him?
And we keep hearing these sort of idiosyncratic stories of how Don't Ask, Don't Tell is playing out for married couples. Another couple is being separated by the status of forces agreement. The member in the armed forces is in Japan. His husband has been with him in Japan but had to go back to Seattle because his marriage is not being recognized for serving abroad. So they're challenging that. So all of these things need to be ironed out.
Meanwhile, 2 gay men got married at West Point for the first time. Both were graduates of the academy.
You know, I resent these stories. A lesbian couple was married at West Point, at least one of whom is still in the military. These 2 guys are not. But suddenly when 2 men get married, it's like the first blah, 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 blah. When men,
I mean, I have to say, I wasn't there. I'm relying on news reports. Thank you for correcting it.
It's not inaccurate. It's that it doesn't. It's like it doesn't count when the women do it, but only when the men do it, then it becomes a whole headline. If I had known, I wouldn't
have even done this story. If I had known, if I had remembered.
I just want to say that the next time the men are first, when the women come along, I'm doing that story as a first.
Okay.
Chelsea Manning, who we know is in prison for whatever they finally ended up charging her with, says that if they don't provide her with hormone therapy and gender reassignment surgery, she is going to sue the military.
And she has applied for a name change from Bradley to Chelsea.
Good.
All right. In New Jersey, the Diocese of Newark is permitting same-sex marriages in diocesan churches using the liturgy that was approved for same-sex blessings in the 2012 General Convention.
The what diocese? The Episcopal
Yes.
diocese?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, well, you just said the diocese.
Well, I did say General Convention. They don't have conventions in the Catholic Church. It's ruled by... More about which later when we talk about the Holy Father.
I need the details.
Okay.
All right. In Colorado, a lesbian couple is suing for marriage, but I'm sure we'll hear about it again when the men sue for marriage. There are civil unions in Colorado, but as in other states, we are now seeing that marriage becomes the goal.
In Texas, a couple that was married in Massachusetts in 2006 want to get divorced in Texas, and the Attorney General there, Greg Abbott, wouldn't authorize it. Now the Texas Supreme Court has heard the case and is going to rule in a few months. It's an all-Republican court. I couldn't tell from the arguments where they were going to go on this.
Well, we've seen a lot of these cases, and generally the state courts don't want to allow the divorce because that is seen as recognizing the marriages.
It's like my right-wing brother said to me when all this got started, it's going to be a mess.
Well, in fact, in this Texas case, someone has pointed out that the divorce laws are somehow separate from the marriage laws, and therefore you could make the case that it's not technically recognizing the marriage to
But the
allow
lawyers
divorce.
for this couple were citing the DOMA decision and saying,
Yes,
can we
yes,
just, you know,
all get
deal
along?
with this?
Probably
Right,
not.
Right.
In
okay.
New Mexico, the insurance regulator, the commissioner of insurance for the state, has said, you know those same-sex couples that have gotten married and we haven't really decided whether they're married yet? Well, guess what, insurance companies? You have to treat them equally as opposite-sex married couples for purposes of insurance until we get all this straightened out.
Okay.
And in, we got a note from viewers, a male couple who were transferred from Wyoming to Kansas. One of them worked for the USDA.
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
Exactly. But they applied for relocation expenses when they were transferred 3 years ago from the federal government, and they said, oh, we're not recognizing your spouse. So they'd gone to Iowa, I think, to get married. So no relocation expenses for the spouse. But now that the Section 3 of DOMA has been struck down, they will get relocation expenses.
Terrific.
3 years later.
It pays to fight.
And our
Stick up for yourselves.
Our hero of the year, the judge in Ohio, the federal judge, Mr. Black, has said that the funeral director can intervene in the lawsuit about recognizing same-sex married couples for purposes of funeral arrangements and survivorship or control of the funeral arrangements. This will allow the suit to be broadened to all same-sex married couples in the state, as opposed to just the two who had applied in the lawsuit before.
So we can get rights in death, at least.
One step at a time. In the new Halperin-Heilman book, Double Down, about the 2012 election of Obama, they go through the whole marriage decision and Obama coming out for marriage.
And Biden doing his little thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, a couple little notes. Obama, coming off the interview with Robin Roberts, walked out of the room and
Where
said,
he came out.
for marriage, said, I feel so good about that. But they also say Biden has no gaydar and doesn't even know how many of his staff are gay. It's just oblivious.
He doesn't care.
Exactly.
He doesn't see gayness.
That's right.
Watch out for those guys.
In Oklahoma, an attorney has asked a court to act on a case filed by lesbians for marriage rights 9 years ago. It's just been sitting there, but now that the DOMA has been struck down, he's going back to the court and saying, you know, really, we meant it.
Okay.
We're serious.
You ready?
Yeah. In Missouri, you know, the case of the male couple. One was a highway patrolman who was killed. 15 years, killed in 2009 on the job, and his partner of 15 years had applied for survivor benefits. And the Missouri Supreme Court has ruled no, you weren't legally married, you do not get survivor benefits under any interpretation of the law.
Nuts. Yeah. Well, from DOMA to ENDA.
Yep.
The Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which is our federal, for better or worse, our federal LGBT rights law, is progressing this week. It got
Employment Non-Discrimination.
Yes, it just covers employment, only some employment. It got the needed 60 votes on Monday in the Senate to pass a cloture vote. Yeah. But that was quite a harrowing tale because two of the sponsors, Murkowski and McCaskill of Missouri and Alaska, they were in transit and they weren't there, so they had to round up some other Republicans who tried to extract something in order to get their support.
Well, there was an actual cloakroom confab that everybody was looking at and watching.
Susan Collins, the Republican sponsor from Maine, got Republicans Kelly Ayotte and Rob Portman of Ohio and Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania. But Toomey is moving an amendment to protect religious freedom on top of the, what I would call outrageous religious exemption that's already in there.
That's not going anywhere. Right. But
the other Republican yeses, by the way, were Orrin Hatch and Dean Heller, who came on board from Nevada, and Mark Kirk of Illinois, who'd been with us for a while.
and who gave his first speech on the floor since his stroke 2 years ago in support of this. But Rob Portman's proposed amendment, which got accepted by voice vote this week on the way to passage of this bill, says that no state or local government can punish a business for taking advantage of the religious exemptions in the federal bill.
Now, they claim that this doesn't override state and local laws. It sounds, and the national groups are all saying, oh, it doesn't mean anything, so we don't want it there, but we don't care. But we ought to care about the larger exemption that's in there. Honest to God, folks, I hate to say this, folks, but we can't throw under the bus people who work for Catholic hospitals, you know, Jewish schools, or whatever. We're not talking about religious groups being told who can, you know, say their prayers and all that kind of stuff. We're talking about workers for religiously affiliated who are not religious themselves.
We're talking about a nurse or a maintenance worker or a teacher.
Or a secretary.
You know, all of these people who have nothing to do with any religious education, rights, or anything, who can, under these exemptions, because the hospital happens to be a Catholic hospital, be fired because the administrator doesn't like the fact that they're gay.
And the Human Rights Campaign was complaining about that in a Catholic school just last week. And now they're enshrining this discrimination in the law. So folks, I'm just saying, you know, I'm not trying to, we can't do this when we pass legislation, or we are giving up so much.
Well, it's a real conundrum, and
it's not a conundrum.
Well,
here's the principle, Ann, and as you know, you don't put an amendment for us that's any different from any other group, race, religions, you know,
I couldn't
gender,
agree
all
more.
that kind of stuff.
Of course,
you have to do it that way. And if you can't get it, you can't get it.
Well, then do you not pass civil unions laws because you're on the way to marriage?
That's all you can get. Like in some of those states where you are forbidden under the Constitution from getting anything, yes.
All I'm saying.
But we're not forbidden under the Constitution.
I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
I'm just saying that there is a point of view that says you should take what you can get and then get more down the road.
That's what the Employment Non-Discrimination Act has been for the last 20 years to begin with.
I don't disagree.
It is an employment act rather than an amendment to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which would cover housing, public accommodations.
Sure.
But they don't want to do that in the Congress because then they say it has to go through 15 committees and 15 chances to get shot down, and we don't want to do that.
Look, we have a heinous Congress
now,
at the moment. But they will tell you that there are some people who will be protected, and that is important, and you should not make the perfect the enemy of the good.
And this is very different. In an equal rights law, you don't let yourself be treated differently in the law. That's what I'm saying.
I hear you.
Now, Susan Collins, the Republican, says that the fact that they've had a relatively big Senate vote win should send a signal to the House that they've got to vote on it. But John Boehner warned of frivolous lawsuits if this thing passes.
To which Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid said, frivolous lawsuits? Do you remember that you just spent $3 million trying to stop the DOMA decision?
But they also are saying on the Republican side in the House, it's not needed. You're already protected. We're already protected, folks.
Who knew?
Yeah. Anyway.
Do they explain that? Just equal protection of the laws?
I have heard right-wingers say this forever. Oh, you're protected under the Constitution.
Oh, okay.
You're Americans.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, then I guess your religious rights are protected under the Constitution, too, and we can get rid of all these religious exemptions.
There's an off chance the thing could get a vote in the House through some maneuvers like adding it to the Defense Authorization Bill or something like that.
Yes.
If it does pass, it applies to workplaces of 15 or more. It exempts...
it's a crumb.
We've talked about how it exempts religious groups. It also exempts the military.
Really?
Yes, it does. Don't forget, we don't have sexual orientation protection in the military. We got rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but we didn't get that.
Our work is never done.
The Catholic bishops said that this law rejects the biological basis of gender. You should talk.
Really?
It equates sexual orientation with race. That's a low blow, you sons of guns. Like you were really out there in the civil rights movement in the 60s. And it undermines marriage and threatens religious liberty. John McCain skipped the vote on Monday to tape the Jimmy Fallon show.
I guess that postcard from his wife had an effect because he didn't show up
He
to
got
vote
out of
no.
town.
Well, that was only the cloture vote. The final passage vote is supposed to come this week as we're taping, so
And
we'll
they're
see whether he shows up for that.
Some crazy amendments may show up. Who knows?
It could get even uglier. But Delta Township in Michigan, their community board, by 6-0, adopted a comprehensive non-discrimination act that includes sexual orientation and gender identity and expression.
And the Coast Guard added sexual orientation protections to their anti-discrimination policy. Now, they're not military per se, they're Department of Transportation?
Homeland Security.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm glad I watched this show.
I'm glad I had the answer, because I don't always. But as we're in the military realm, we should also note that former Defense Secretary Robert Gates, who oversaw the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, is the new president of the Boy Scouts of America.
Maybe he can get them to stop discriminating in about...
I think that's the hope.
Yeah?
You may remember they've revoked their ban on gay scouts, but not gay leaders.
I never quite felt Mr. Gates's enthusiasm for what he was doing in getting rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but he did it. But he did it.
Completely unfair.
But he did it.
Completely unfair. You do not know him personally, and you do not know.
I am just talking about his demeanor when he was doing this stuff.
He hasn't shown enthusiasm for anything. He's a complete
Well,
blank.
there you are. Okay.
I don't buy it.
All right. Anyway, in California, the opponents of the trans rights law for students say they have the necessary signatures to qualify for a referendum to repeal it. That will be a
Ugly, ugly fight.
Yep.
And also potentially ugly, well, let's get into, we're still in the sort of election realm. Charlie Crist running for governor of Florida again.
But he hasn't come out.
No,
He came out as a Democrat.
Well, and he got married, and yes, he came out as a Democrat. Actually, I was going to talk about him afterwards in contrast, but now I've flipped it. Representative Mike Michaud of Maine, a Democrat,
57 years old.
has come out. I have him as 58.
We got his, well, maybe he had a birthday. He's in his 6th term in Congress. We got a picture of Michaud there. There he is.
Came out as gay because he is running for governor against the Tea Party incumbent, Paul LePage, who vetoed gay stuff and marriage stuff endlessly.
So he comes out on an op-ed and he says, yes, I am.
He said there were
But
rumors.
why should it matter?
Wait, first, he came out because there were rumors.
Whispering campaign.
Whisper campaign. So he came out, yes. He writes
Push
this
polls.
op-ed. Go back to the op-ed he writes.
Yeah, he says, yes, I am, but why should it matter? He doesn't mention gay rights, but he hopes his coming out makes it easier for future generations.
He says he's very, very comfortable with who he is. The fact that it's taken him until he's 57 or 58 to come out belies that position.
Well, in 2006, he voted he voted against the federal marriage amendment. That's a good vote. But then he voted no on the Employment Non-Discrimination Act in 2007. Then he became a sponsor in 2009. In 2012, now he's running for governor now.
Yeah.
Maine voted for same-sex marriage 53-47 in 2012. The manager of that campaign, Matthew McTighe, is going to be his campaign manager.
Yes.
Now, we have other out candidates for governor. Heather, we're not counting.
In Maryland.
Yeah, in Maryland.
Charlie Crist, except he's not out.
But we're not counting Jim McGreevey because he didn't get elected as an openly gay governor.
The point being, we've never had an openly gay governor, unless you count the guy who was governor of New York about 200 years ago.
Oh, the cross-dresser.
Yes.
But that was even before the revolution.
Yes.
Okay.
That
wasn't America.
Yeah.
That was some,
Yeah. Other election
Great
news,
Britain.
current election news. Houston out lesbian mayor Anise Parker was reelected to her 3rd term. This is, then she hits term limits.
She got over 50% of the vote, and she doesn't have a runoff.
That's good, because she was expected to have a tougher fight than that.
And
So
in Seattle, out gay state legislator Ed Murray was elected. We're now reading that he wasn't the most liberal candidate in the race, but he
Well, he
got
beat
elected.
the incumbent, McGinn, but Seattle has a history of throwing out the incumbent mayors.
It's fun.
So if only we could get better at that in New York.
Yes. In New York, we got Bill de Blasio, who's not gay, but is married to a woman who was a lesbian.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's very pro-gay.
Yes.
We could go into nuances about his positions, but he's seen as a great progressive light. We will see.
And we elected 3 new gay members of the New York City Council, Corey Johnson, Carlos Menchaca, Richie Torres, bringing the total to 6 on the current New York City Council.
And then a lot of cities are, you know, vying for who's got the most gays in their council percentage-wise. St. Pete has 3 out of 7. Harper's Ferry, West Virginia has 3 of 7, population 286, pretty good. But West Hollywood has 4 out of 5.
Yes. Atlantic City, New Jersey elected a gay mayor, Don Guardian, a Republican. We don't, we hadn't been paying attention, so we don't know about his policies, but he says his partner brought him back down to earth after the election by making him cook and clean.
Now, Governor Christie is being hailed as this great Republican moderate, but let's not forget, folks, he's totally anti-abortion, and he's anti-most gay rights.
Mm-hmm. Royal Oak, Michigan voters upheld the Non-Discrimination Act, including sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, passed by their city council earlier.
Back in March. It goes into effect November 17th. This is the 30th Michigan municipality to do so.
And that's big. I mean, Michigan's a huge battleground on these issues because there's this guy running the American Family Association chapter there who is just rabid in his hatred of us, and he has been single-handedly a force against us for years.
He's making a big mistake. Because every time he brings these referenda and things like that, it makes the whole world have to discuss it.
Yeah,
and
we
we're winning.
do like that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and in the corporate world, our New York State Controller, Mr. DiNapoli, has just gotten Ameritrade to adopt a non-discrimination policy for sexual orientation and gender identity and expression.
And by the way, our mayor-elect, Bill de Blasio, did better among gays than non-gays, but he won by 45% overall.
That's 45 points. He didn't get 45%. The spread was 45
the spread,
points.
It was enormous.
Yes. In New Jersey, a couple is suing for the right to send their 15-year-old son to conversion therapy.
He doesn't want to be gay, and he needs the therapy, they say. They said he suffers from unwanted gender identity disorder and unwanted same-sex attractions.
Well, you can send him to a therapist. You just can't send him to conversion camp.
To a quack.
Yeah. Sad.
And we're relieved that Cuccinelli lost in Virginia as governor. I mean, Terry McAuliffe is no prize, although he was very pro-gay.
Yes.
Everybody
and overt about it in the campaign. That's the thing to look at there, that he actually used his support of us to help him win the election.
But I'm a little concerned,
Isn't that different from the
I'm a
way
little
things
concerned,
used
and
to
I will
be?
raise my hobby horse here, because he won the election 48 to 45 while he was like 12 points up in the polls, 10 points up in the polls. That means that a lot of us didn't turn out, our side didn't turn out to vote. I don't mean gays, I mean progressives or, you know, liberals.
You interpret it that way. For me, it's about the continually hidden right-wing vote that doesn't show up in the polls. And we learned that lesson in California around Prop 8 and in many other elections. And we just have to beware of these seeming, you know, winning percentages in the polls as we go into these elections.
Their side is more enthusiastic.
Do not be complacent.
No.
And on a lighter note, Hallmark. Hallmark has come out with some new Christmas tree ornaments. When I first saw this, I thought it was an actual sweater, but it turns out to be a Christmas tree ornament.
It does look like a sweater.
Yeah, well, it's in the shape of a sweater.
Yeah.
But it's a Christmas tree ornament. But it's controversial because it says, "Don we now our fun apparel."
Instead of gay apparel.
And some
The
people...
word that gets Snickers out of people all that time.
Every time you sing the song, Deck the Halls, and you get to "Now we don our gay apparel," everybody goes, "Ooh." So Hallmark said, we'll get around that by calling it fun apparel, because isn't that what gay means in the original meaning anyway?
Well, I mean, I don't, you know, I mean, you think it's homophobic?
Well, the people would say they did it for that reason, to be homophobic.
Well, or to recapture the original meaning of the word. Who knows?
Who knows? All right, now on to international news, which is less lighthearted.
Well, we start in Russia, where in St. Petersburg,
Yeah.
there's at a gay social event for LGBT youth and allies at a community center on Sunday. It's called Rainbow Coffee. Assailants entered and said they were looking for a friend, and then they opened fire with a pneumatic gun. Another brandished a bat. 2 were injured. We have a picture of a guy who was shot in the eye and will lose the eye or lose the sight in the eye. Anti-gay groups have called for action versus the center, which provides HIV and STD prevention. Attacks have moved from the streets, they're saying, and to they're actually entering, invading places like this.
Yeah.
The guy in the shot there was Dmitry Chizhevsky. He was hospitalized. He says he will fight on.
Yeah, he says he cannot retreat, or that will send a signal that they've won. But you're right about this distinction now. It's not just clashes with gay activists in the street who are going out to hold a pride parade. This is actually deliberately planning to go into a gay space and attack.
Now, the police show up, and they say, well, we don't see any evidence of a crime.
Yeah.
But the fact that Dmitry was hospitalized meant that they had to open an investigation, which they're calling hooliganism, rather than a premeditated hate crime, which is what it was.
Also in St. Petersburg, Vitaly Milanov, who was the right-wing legislator who dreamed up the anti-propaganda law in the first place.
We had him on the show a couple of weeks ago, didn't we?
Yeah, broke up a Halloween party.
What is it, Satanist? Satan? Is it Satanistic?
1,000 people in a St. Petersburg park, and he comes charging in, and now it was gay people.
Well, if you're planning to go to the Sochi Olympics, you might want to reconsider, given what's going on over there already. Norway's TV2, which is the official Norway television thing that's going to be doing the Olympics, was out there doing a story, and they were repeatedly detained and questioned by the police while trying to do the stories 3 times. They were aggressively questioned about their work plans, personal lives, sources, and their religious beliefs. They were denied a chance to call. They were denied a chance to call the embassy. This is what's going to happen, folks. This is fascism.
The cops picked up a Russian TV crew too, and they're still in detention. They've been disappeared. Why? Well, in part because they're asking questions about gay stuff. In part because they're asking questions about the environmental atrocities being committed around Sochi, which are contractually forbidden by the IOC. In part because Canadian lugers said their hotel did not have...
Lugers? What are lugers?
People riding luges.
The sleds, those fast sleds.
Their hotel in Sochi did not have power and running water.
Now, how come I don't, I watch the Today Show in the morning, at least in the beginning. How come I'm not seeing this is a pretty interesting story. How come I'm not seeing it on the Today Show?
Well, you should watch MSNBC because Thomas Roberts is now in Russia for the Miss Universe pageant.
Is he a contestant?
He's the co-host,
This way we bury the headline.
We've been talking about this for
I'm
weeks.
saying if he was a contestant, it would be burying the headline.
Exactly. Now, he's there to be an example to LGBT Russian youth of a symbol of hope. So he gives his first report this week. He says, I've been here 14 hours. I've come with a neutral attitude. I am here to learn. It's as if I know nothing. Well, yes, you know nothing.
You don't watch Gay USA.
So he does his first interview there. He's there to cover and to learn about what's going on with LGBT stuff because he doesn't watch Gay USA or read the New York Times, evidently. So who does he sit down with for his first interview in Russia on LGBT stuff? The gay Russian TV anchor who lost his job when he came out. Perfectly good story, but is it a coincidence that TV anchor Thomas Roberts turns to TV anchor, what's his name?
Birds of a feather flock together.
I refer to it as Thomas liking to look in the mirror.
I see.
So he wasn't at the bedside of the guy in St. Petersburg who had his eyes shot out.
Now, Thomas, if you think we're being unfair to you, come on the show. We'll talk about it.
Well, you know, maybe in a few days, maybe by next week, I'll be apologizing to Thomas Roberts because he will be doing hard-hitting journalism. But I have to admit, I am skeptical when I see that he is co-hosting the Miss Universe
what do you
pageant.
think about our friend Valery Gergiev and what he's saying? Now, this is the conductor who's the friend of Putin who made a statement about the gay stuff this week. What did he say?
Well, first I have to say congratulations to our real friend Peter Tatchell.
I was going to get to that.
No, I think we have to lead with that. Peter Tatchell, famous British gay
well, he's
activist.
Australian, but he lives in London.
Yes, and who we did an hour interview with on this show because his life is so fascinating. He does things like,
take over the pulpit on Canterbury Cathedral on Easter Sunday to let the church have it.
And citizens' arrests of Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe when he shows up in London.
For which he gets beat up a lot.
So we let Peter know that Gergiev was going to be conducting a concert in London.
He conducts the London Symphony Orchestra.
Exactly, and we had gone after him at the Metropolitan Opera here in Carnegie Hall, so we just had demonstrations outside and people in the audience yelling.
So Peter puts on a tuxedo, ascends the stage, and people think he's introducing the program. And he tells them what the hell's going on with Gergiev and all the sins of Russia, and he gets some applause. He gets some applause, but he gets manhandled.
Yeah.
By the security.
Well, people get upset.
Good for you, Peter. You are brave.
Absolutely. I ask you to oppose tyranny and show your support for the Russian people.
Now, we told you about a protest.
Wait, I was going to tell you what Gergiev did.
Please.
So Gergiev this week, after this string of protests, writes on his Facebook page, I love gay people. I've always worked with gay people.
What are you trying to tell us, Valerie?
Some of my best friends are gay people, blah, blah, blah. And as was then pointed out to him, we don't care whether your friends are gay. The point is you are a colleague of Putin's. You supported his election. You've refused to speak out against these laws. That's what we want you to do. And he still has said nothing.
Well, now we told you about a protest that was done at the Princeton Club against a Russian investment forum in New York. And there's another one coming up on November 18th. Well, we said it was co-sponsored by the city of New York. Turns out it was not. The mayor wrote a pro forma letter of welcome, which they used to say that they were supporting. So they've dropped off the website as a supporter. But the keynote speaker, we got a picture of him here, is the president of the American Bar Association, James Silkenat. This guy, who apparently does a lot of business with Russia,
and a lot of human rights work,
is putting the name of the American Bar Association on a Russian investment forum. And he's trying to get out of it well, he's not trying to get out of the thing, he's doing it. He was confronted by Senator Brad Hoylman, who says we got to divest from Russia.
Yes, thank you.
And, and he's just saying, oh, I want to work with the reformers. They're not coming to this conference. The people at the conference are the people who want us dead.
So on November 18th at 9 a.m., we will be outside this conference with our big Queer Nation banners. 8th Avenue and 41st Street in New York on November 18th. Please join us. You'll have a good time.
And our friend Sarah Schulman was in Russia, and she reported from Moscow. She met with 18 LGBT people, and they use the word fascism when they discuss the Russian regime. They want us to boycott Russian government products and actively support grassroots Russian activism.
When we do protests in the West, we raise morale among LGBT people in Russia.
And if you think things are bad now, they are saying after the Olympics, things are going to even get worse.
Yeah.
Just as they did in Germany for Jews after the 36 Olympics. And I don't have to tell you how bad that was.
Russia has stopped adoptions to everybody in Malta pending because they're considering a civil unions bill there. This is what they said they were going to do. This is what they're doing.
Okay. Some other international news?
The Board of Immigration Appeals has reversed an immigration judge and has told the lower court to hear an appeal by a Jamaican afraid of torture and murder. He's using the pseudonym Anthony.
Guido Barilla of Barilla Pasta, who said in September that he would never use a gay family in one of his ads, and if you don't like it, you should buy some other pasta, which I have been. Now he says They will take a more inclusive approach to advertising, and they formed an advisory council that includes American David Mixner. On the other hand, Carlos Dews, who is an English professor at John Cabot University in Rome, who helped fuel the boycott, was very skeptical. It may all be window dressing. The company won't say if the boycott is hurting sales, but profits have fallen in recent years.
Yeah, and we're a big
the US
market
is,
for them.
we're their second biggest market here.
The Vatican is telling its bishops around the world to poll parishes on how they handle birth control, divorce, same-sex marriage, blah, 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 in anticipation of meetings next year and the year after.
Well, it's a questionnaire to, it's a questionnaire to, we're only got down to 2 minutes?
Yeah.
And Ireland is going to vote on same-sex marriage in 2015 and lowering the voting age to 17. I'm for both those things.
I was shocked and delighted to see in an interview with Kerry Washington by The Advocate that she, when she was 13 years old, was part of a theater troupe in New York that did AIDS education in the schools and
Great.
homophobia education that we used to work with. Hi,
Great.
Carrie. Did we know you when you were 13?
Probably.
Yeah. And our most favorite and popular guest host, Chris Cooper, has been to the movies and saw the Dallas Buyers Club AIDS movie.
Big thumbs up.
Yep.
You can read his full review at cfcooper.net. And he said Ender's Game, which he didn't pay to go see.
He bought a ticket to another movie in the Cineplex and then went to see Ender's Game.
He said those who boycott aren't missing much, and he has a trashy pleasure in the TV series Revenge, which has a bisexual character.
I'm watching that.
Steamy Sense. Donna Minkowitz also says that Ender's Game ruins the story. And I saw Kill Your Darlings, about the origins of the Beat Generation, with Daniel Radcliffe as a young Allen Ginsberg and Dane Lahan as Lucian Carr, who kills an older gay man whose attentions he grows to resent. I think it's a very creepy movie, but it's also very evocative of that era, and it kind of helps you understand how all that came about.
And there are people who say it's okay to go see Ender's Game because it turns out Orson Scott Card had a limited contractual agreement that gave him no profits from the movie. But the fact is, if the movie does well, there will be sequels which he'll profit from. But
Right.
the fact is, the movie did not do
And
that well.
And he'll sell more books.
Yeah, and so people think that's going down the drain. So
Boy.
that is it for us. We will see you next week.
Thanks for being with us.